What's up, everybody? My name is Draven Schultz, here once again with my teacher, Mr. Grimsley, and here's 3 O'Clock Sports Episode 2. Today we got a few more things to talk about, and first, just kind of give a brief recap on this past week's NFL games. One of the first things I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers without Big Ben, with Juju Smith-Schuster struggling in their first year without Antonio Brown, are sitting at 5-4 and just beat the defending NFC champs, LA Rams.
I love their defense. The defense is playing so well. They're controlling these games with defense. And then they're well coached. They know how to control the ball. They're not asking for too much from their quarterback. They're just doing what they need to do to win games. And that's what I wish all the teams would do. That's smart football.
Yeah, that's basically just like he said. I mean, they're playing really smart. They're fitting the offense well around running the ball and making it easy for Mason Rudolph, who, this is his first year getting starting to play time, and obviously it helps with having a guy like Big Ben to coach him up when he's not on the field. And they get James Conner back this week against the Browns, which will help because he's their best running back, and they've done a really good job. Another thing I want to talk about is the Browns, despite looking pretty much down in the dumps, won against a 6-2 Bills team who a lot of people thought would beat the Browns. How do you feel about that?
I wasn't impressed with the Browns. I know they won, and it's a good victory for them. But I'm still seeing the same things I see every week. The same mistakes. I don't want to see any more 5 wide on the 2-yard line. I've seen 2 safeties in 1 year on the same exact formation. I just don't want to see that happen anymore.
Yeah, the play calling. I thought the play calling was improved, but still not great because there were a lot of formations that were really cool. Having Kareem Hunt back was really nice because we ran a lot of sets where we would have Baker out of shotgun, and then on his left side Chubb, and then on his right side Kareem, and have them basically work with each other really well, like either through the run game or the passing game, and it opens up a little more. And I think you could tell with Baker's performance last week, he looked better. There's still a lot to be fixed, obviously.
That was the closest I've seen to 2018 Baker this year. That was the best performance I've seen him.
Yeah, overall, we looked okay. We looked better than we have in a while, but it's a good win against a team with a good defense, and we got to keep rolling that momentum this week against Pittsburgh. A couple more things I wanted to talk about. The Dolphins, just a quick one. The Dolphins, after looking like the worst team football's ever seen, have won 2 in a row.
Well, if I had a choice, I'd take Fitzpatrick over Hoyer any day. I don't know what's going on with the Miami run defense. That's 2 weeks in a row where the run defense looked pretty decent. I thought Mac was just going to destroy them, and he looked. I didn't see him get more than a few yards per carry.
Yeah, it's really weird to watch because this is a Dolphins team that even when Fitzpatrick was under center to start the year, they looked just inept on the field. Like they couldn't move the ball at all. Their defense was getting shredded. Even when they still had Minkah Fitzpatrick on the team, they just looked awful. In the last couple of weeks, they've looked competitive, and yeah, it's nice for Dolphins fans. They get a couple wins, kind of get that excitement of winning, but it hurts their tanking season because that seemed to be their goal, and all they're doing is making that worse, where now multiple teams have better or worse records than them and have better positions in the draft.
It's something the Browns used to always do, lose all these games and then all of a sudden start winning these meaningless ones when they couldn't make the playoffs.
Yep.
I am impressed with their wide receiver crew, though. I would take those wide receivers any day.
Yeah, and the last thing we wanted to talk about Week 10 in the NFL is the 49ers, the last undefeated team in the league, lost Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks. That was a heck of a game to watch.
Defense. I loved seeing the Niners defense, and then all of a sudden the Seahawks stepped it up. 3 defensive touchdowns in that game?
So.
3 defensive touchdowns in one game. Both teams had one. This is the best that I've seen Russell play in a long time. That team looks like a team it's tough to beat. If you ask me right now, that's a team I see coming into the Super Bowl for that division.
Yeah, that's probably up there for game of the year. That was such a fun game to watch. 49ers pulled out early. It was 10-0. It looked like the Seahawks were possibly down and out of it, and then they came roaring back and took a 21-10 lead, and then all of a sudden the 49ers defense came up big again and made it a close game and ended up going into overtime. A missed field goal and then a clutch drive by the Seahawks later, and they took out the last undefeated team in the league, and we finally saw the first chink in the armor of the 49ers. So it was.
If you stop the running game, and if Kittle and Sanders remain hurt, there is no offense to be found on that team.
Yeah, I think Jimmy Garoppolo showed that while he's a good quarterback, he still needs some pieces around him because he's very, very similar to kind of like Jared Goff, how when it's down to him to make the play, he just doesn't make those plays.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to move on here to this week in the NFL. We wanted to talk about Cleveland Browns are at home tomorrow night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It is a big game as the Browns have won, and they're sitting at 3-6, and they basically need to win out if they want to keep their playoff hopes alive. And the Steelers, who we were just talking about, have shockingly won 4 in a row despite being a depleted team talent-wise. And it's a big game, and it's a game that could possibly rekindle a rivalry that has been dead for probably my lifetime at least.
Yeah, I think this is a game, you can't really say that it's that exciting of a game quite yet because the Browns are only 3-6, and the Steelers are just now starting to come on. It's going to be a defensive game. I don't think we're going to see them lightening it up in the end zone. So, it could be a boring game. Just like that Browns game. That game wasn't that boring, but there wasn't a lot of offense.
Yeah, it'll be a tough, grinded out type game. Basically, what it comes down to is the rushing attack for Pittsburgh. That's how they win, is they run the ball heavy, and when they run the ball heavy and it works, it makes it way easier for Mason Rudolph to make plays and make easier throws because guys get more open because they're worrying about the run game. And the Browns' run defense has been very hit or miss. Like last week, they did a really good job against Devin Singletary. And then,
unfortunately for my fantasy team.
Yeah, he's on mine too, but he's on the bench. But then some weeks they just get destroyed, and they don't look very capable against the run. So that, to me, that's basically the big point. If the Browns want to win this game, that's what they have to do, is stop the run.
And it always seems like when you watch a Browns game, they'll be doing good, and then they just make the worst mistake. I saw that with the Seahawks game. Mm-hmm. I thought they did everything they could to give the Bills back that game.
Yep.
And if they can have one mistake-free game, one penalty-free game, they'll beat the Steelers. I can definitely see them beating the Steelers.
Yeah, I guess if I had to give my prediction, it's really hard to predict games like this because no one really knows, to be honest. But if I had to pick, I'm a little biased because I'm a Browns fan, but I do think the Browns, if they can just play their game and play smart and just, play calm, I guess, they can win. They can win this game because they are more talented than Pittsburgh. They just need to clean up some of the penalties, keep the play calling better, keep making improvements upon each week.
And from what we saw, they could have a real two-headed monster with Hunt back there with Chubbs.
Yeah, that was scary looking. And briefly, I just wanted to talk about, and ask a question. Is it truly possible that the Browns could win out and finish 10-6? I wrote here, the remaining games they're at home against Pittsburgh tomorrow. They're at home against the Dolphins. They're back on the road against Pittsburgh. Then they play Cincy. Then they're at Arizona. Then they are home against Baltimore, who's a good team, but we beat by double-digit points earlier in the season. And then we close the season in Cincinnati. And those are all winnable games. Those are all truly winnable games based on the team that we have.
At the beginning of the year, I said 9-7. Looking at the rest of the schedule, those games are all winnable. And one thing, about the Browns is they got hot last year. I don't think anybody wanted to play them last year. So if this team gets hot with the talent that they have, watch out. They are still just as talented as they were at the beginning of the year. So nobody doubts the talent. So the problem was they played a tougher schedule than the Patriots. They probably had one of the toughest schedules in the NFL, week in and week out, with new head coach, quarterback who hasn't proven himself. But now these games are going to get a little easier. If they start gelling, and if some of these guys make it a problem where they have to, stop focusing on OBJ and let him get open a little bit, if he can start getting some touches that aren't forced, but he's actually open, this team could be trouble.
Yeah, that's been the story of the Browns. If they could open up the offense and call the right plays and just get comfortable, it would be the scariest offense in the league. The Chiefs are great. The Rams are good when they're on fire, but there's no team that has Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb, and Baker. Well, when Baker plays well, he's really good. So
I really liked him rolling out. He was rolling out against the Bills, and he was doing that so much better than he had all year. If he can keep that up, they'll do some good things.
Should be interesting. And the last thing we want to talk about is the second edition of the College Football Playoff Rankings came out last night. And the top 4 are LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, and Georgia. Georgia's a little bit of a surprising one to me. And the first 2 out are Alabama, who just lost to LSU at number 5, and number 6, Oregon, who lost early in the season, are slowly creeping back for, that possible spot in the top 4. Do you think, I guess the first question I'll ask is, do you think Alabama will get back in?
Yeah, because, you watch that game, they really almost came back. They were really starting to come back against LSU. It was at home, so they shouldn't have been playing that bad to begin with. Having their quarterback come back, from injury a little bit, he was a little rusty. He had a huge fumble at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
LSU looked amazing though, and how do you say a team that gets beat by who you're saying is number one, that they drop that much? If they're the number one team and they get beat by the number one team,
and it's close, I mean,
yeah.
2 or 3 would make
sense. They
sense.
had LSU ranked ahead of them before the game even started, so they were already thinking LSU was a little better. So how far do you drop? If they make the top 4 and they make those playoffs, watch out.
Yeah, should be scary because they're the most well coached and most set in stone organization or football team among these top 6. And the interesting thing about it is LSU, Alabama, and Georgia are all SEC teams. And normally it tends to be one team from each conference that makes it, maybe 2, because we saw the one year where I believe it was Alabama and Georgia played for the national championship. Yeah. So maybe 1 or 2. So one of those SEC teams at least are not going to be in the top 4, which opens the door for Oregon, who all they need to do is win out and just hope that the SEC unfolds in a good way for them. And another question I want to ask is Clemson. They haven't played anybody. They've struggled against bad teams, but they've been able to remain undefeated. Do you think once it hits playoff time, do you think Clemson is the team that they were last year, or do you think they're truly just not the same?
No, I don't think. Looking at this year, there's some dominant teams. Ohio State is so far been the most dominant team I've seen. They just have the complete package. I like them even a little better than LSU, regardless of what the polls say.
Yeah.
So then, based on watching or what I saw the Alabama LSU game, those 2 teams are better than Clemson. So unless they're that odd man out that squeaks in that 4th spot, I really don't see them doing much. But when you don't play anybody, you can really rise up the rankings fast. Ohio State hasn't been quite challenged yet. They got 2 huge games coming up. If they blow out Penn State and blow out Michigan, there's no doubt they're the number 1 team.
Yeah, it actually works out for Ohio State because news just came out today that Chase Young's suspension is reduced. He will only be suspended 1 more game, and they play Rutgers, I believe, this weekend. And then he comes back for the big Penn State and Michigan games, so that'll be huge to have him back. And, if we can win those games in dominant fashion, I wouldn't be surprised if we got moved up to the number 1 spot.
And the problem is there's going to be some conference championships. So for these, any of these teams to go unscathed, you're going to see one of these teams in the top 5, top 6. You're going to see 1 or 2 of these teams lose a game.
Yep, and one thing I wanted to touch on really quick is 2 teams I'd watch out for that, a lot of people don't really talk about, but are undefeated teams that could pose a threat, and that's Baylor, who's a little bit higher up in the rankings. I believe they're around 11 or 12, and then Minnesota, who just beat Penn State and did a really good job, and they're undefeated, and they moved all the way up to 7th or 8th, I believe.
One thing I think that people finally realized is that Minnesota's offensive line is for real. They probably have one of the biggest offensive lines in the country.
Yeah, they're huge.
So you can run the ball, if you can pound that rock, control the game, and then you have a good defense, and you're playing these Big Ten teams, they got some games too that are going to show who they really are. A lot of people were surprised. They thought Penn State was going to come in there and beat them. But when I saw that offensive line, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep, should be a fun last 3-4 weeks of college football regular season, and then obviously the bowl games, and then it's time for the college football playoffs. Well, that's all we have to talk about today. As always, thanks for watching. If you made it this far, if you can, leave a like and subscribe. That'd be great. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.